I remembered my mother. She was tall, blonde hair, skinny as a rail. She always seemed to be perpetually in shorts and a tank top. And I loved her. I followed her around our cramped and dirty home like a puppy. As soon as she sat down or stopped moving, I'd be there, my little hands reaching towards her, trying to sit in her lap, trying to pull on her clothes and get her attention. I loved planting kisses on her cheek, calling her mama, but she'd always push me away, always move away from me as if I were some kind of leper. But I didn't know this, not really. I was too young. All I knew was that she was Mama and I loved her. Our home smelled terrible. That's what I remembered most, even now looking back. I had normal human senses back then, but still the smell of the place was overwhelming. I loved it when my mama would prop the front door open and let the fresh air in. I was never permitted outside. But if I stayed a few feet back, the cool air would still rush in, and the sun would wash over me and make me warm. I'd close my eyes and lay in that tiny patch of sun, pretending to be a tree or a lizard. My mother would be smoking or drinking or doing other things. I hated it when any other person came by. There would always be shouting and smashing of things. It was so common that I would run behind the filthy sofa and hide if I heard footsteps approaching the home. It was better to be safe than sorry. The people who came to our home were always mean or angry, or some mixture of both. One day, one of my mother's visitors saw me and kicked me with his foot and stood there laughing. I cried. I'd not been hurt before, not like that, and not with such intended malice. My mother had screamed at both of us, and I had crawled behind the sofa till the man had left. I kept waiting for my mother to come and comfort me, but she never came. When I was sure that it was safe, I'd come out from my hiding place and wrapped myself in a stained and smelly blanket. I remembered being hungry, and I called out to my mother, but she wasn't there. She didn't come back for 2 days. I had survived off what I could steal from the fridge, and it wasn't much. When the door opened on that second day, I ran to my mother. I was overjoyed to see her. "Mama!" I cried, grabbing hold of her t-shirt as she bent down to me. "God, you stink, you smell like an animal," she laughed, holding me at arm's length as I tried to reach her for a hug. I cried. I didn't really understand the words, but I knew that I was being made fun of. She laughed again and handed me half a sandwich in a bag she was carrying. The food tasted old, but I was so hungry I devoured it and sat down on the floor, feeling full for the first time in days. I smiled at my mama. She had propped the door open, and sun and air were coming in, and I felt warm and safe, and I felt myself getting sleepy with the sun on my skin. "Listen, I'm going to need to go away for a little while, the rest of the day. Mama has a job that she needs to do, but then she'll be back by nighttime, okay? And I'll bring you some more food. Mama just needs you to stay quiet and be a good little boy. Do you understand?" she asked. Her voice sounded raspy and harsh, like she hadn't had much water. "Mama," was all I said. My head was already on the carpet, feeling the warmth from the sun. I felt at peace, and with a half-full stomach I fell asleep. When I woke up, the sun was setting. The door was still open, but my mama was gone. I wasn't worried about that, not really. She had told me she'd be going away again. I was more concerned that the door was still open. She always closed it, no matter what. I listened carefully. There was only silence. I took a few timid steps forward and poked at the door, letting it wiggle on its rusty hinges. It was wedged open so it wouldn't close. I felt a thrill being this close to the outside. I was never allowed outside, so this was a rare treat. I didn't take a step outside, but I did sit there. My feet outside the house, my bare toes touching the sparse grass that was underneath them, while my backside stayed planted on the floor. It felt like freedom, and I had to fight the urge to run out into the yard. I didn't do that. Mama wouldn't like it. As night came, I felt the temperature change in the air. It was cooler but still pleasant. The sounds of the night were filling the air, and I felt goosebumps on my skin as the cool breeze washed over my skin. I could hear an owl in the distance. Its soft hooting was soothing. I tried hooting back to it and giggling, thinking it was funny that I was trying to talk to the bird. I watched in fascination as fireflies filled the yard. Their soft glow seemed otherworldly to me. I held out my hand, hoping one of the glowing insects would land on it so I could take a closer look at it. In the distance, I saw the headlights of a car approaching, and my stomach sank. Mama didn't have a car. She walked everywhere. So, whoever was coming was not Mama. Still, I stayed there a few more minutes, hoping the car would pass me by and I could sit by the door a little longer. No such luck, as the car pulled into the yard and I saw flashing lights on top of it. Red and blue flashing, bright and unable to be ignored. It scared me. I had never seen a car like that before, and I panicked. I ran back inside the house, darting behind the sofa and staying as still as possible. I was as quiet as a mouse, as inconsequential as a shadow. Maybe the people in the car, realizing my mama was not there, would leave. I heard the car doors open and close, the sounds of heavy shoes on gravel. I couldn't see them, but they sounded like men. I saw him. The boy was sitting by the front door, and I think he went back inside, a voice said from outside the house. He sounded young, but his voice carried. I saw it too. The car must have spooked him. Do we know the boy's name? Dispatch didn't give us a name, another man replied, his voice lower with a slight southern drawl to it. There was no answer, just the sound of the men drawing closer and their heavy steps as they came inside. It stinks in here. This place is a pig pen. How was anyone living in this with a young child? The younger man said, disgust in his voice. You'll see worse if you stick around long enough. Let's just hope we don't find any dead bodies. Ever smell a human corpse left to rot? Smells like hell on earth and you never forget it, the older voice said. Lights clicked on, and I knew that they had flashlights. The lights in our house hadn't worked in a long time. Luckily, this place isn't huge. We'll find him. Poor little guy is probably terrified, the young man said, his voice growing softer with concern. I kept as still as I could, but I started to tremble. I was cold and still hungry, and I was terrified. I didn't know these men, and if they wanted to hurt me, there was nothing stopping them. Even Mama wasn't here to protect me. I listened to their footsteps as they checked the bedroom and walked around the living room. My face was pressed into the filthy carpet as I willed them not to find me. But they found me. I could feel them getting closer even if I couldn't see them, and even with my eyes closed, I was aware of the light from the flashlights falling across my body. I let out a tiny whimper as I knew I was discovered. I found him! Jim! He was behind the sofa! The younger man called out. I tensed, expecting the man to just grab me or kick me. But he didn't do any of those things. He called out to me gently. Hey there, buddy. It's okay. My name is Officer Reyes, and I'm here to help. My partner is Jim Hostiter, and he's a nice man too. We're not going to hurt you. We're here to help. Can you tell me your name? The younger man, Reyes, said. I lifted my head and turned to look at him. Of all the things I expected to happen, having someone be gentle to me was not one of them. The officer was crouched down behind me, one arm extended to me as if he was waiting for me to take it. I turned around and wiped my face and reached out my hand to him. He took it gently. His hand was large, and my tiny one disappeared as he wrapped his fingers around mine. I giggled. It had been a long time since I'd been treated with anything resembling kindness. There's a good buddy. Can you tell me your name? Or do I keep calling you Buddy? Reyes smiled gently. I liked him. He was gentle and calm with me. I liked his face, smooth and brown and young. I held my other hand out to him, and he took it, pulling me into a hug as he lifted me up off the floor. Mama, I said simply. Oh, is your name Mama? Funny, You look more like a Brian to me, or a Fred." The man teased. I giggled again and settled into his embrace. I felt warm and safe, and I let out a sigh. "Well, would you look at that? Maybe we should call you the baby whisperer, huh, Reyes?" "The other man," Jim said, his flashlight trained on us both. "I think my own name is just fine. Let's get this little guy to the station and we can track down the next of kin," Reyes said, carrying me out of the house. I had never been inside a car before. Officer Reyes held me in his lap as the other man drove. I was completely enthralled by the whole experience. I pressed my hand to the glass and watched the world go by. It felt like I was flying. At the small police station, the women at the front desk fussed over me. It felt both wonderful and overwhelming to have that kind of attention. The women took me to the restroom and washed me down, throwing away the rags I had been wearing. Another woman had gone to the local store and bought new clothes for me. I still remember the feeling of that new cloth against my skin. It felt so clean and solid, everything I had worn before that was threadbare. I clung to the youngest woman's leg and buried my head in her jeans. She was young and blonde like my mama, and if I closed my eyes, I could pretend that it was her. "Mama!" I called out pathetically. "Oh, you poor thing. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll find your family," the younger woman reassured me, tears in her eyes. "So does this little boy even have a name?" Jim asked. He seemed to be asking the room itself, and no one had an answer. "Jim, this little boy doesn't even seem to have a birth certificate. He doesn't have a name or a social security number either. It really seems like that woman gave birth and never told anyone, keeping him in that house his whole life. And now she's run off, so we can't even ask her what his name is," Reyes said, looking down at me. "Let's just be thankful that she called the station and let us know where he was. He wouldn't have survived if he had been left alone. There's no way." Reyes shuddered as he spoke. I had run back to him and was happily sitting in his lap. They had given me some food to eat, and I was feeling the closest to contentment I'd ever had in my short life. Jim looked at me, kneeling and getting into eye line with me. His eyes looked sad, and his mustache and beard were laced with silver. "Little boy, can you not tell us what your name is?" he asked softly. "Mama," was all I could say. "Jesus Christ," the older man said, closing his eyes and rubbing his temples. "I don't think that's his name either," Reyes teased. That got a chuckle out of Jim, and he went back to his chair. "Hey, fellas, someone is coming to pick up our little man here," the older lady said, walking into the room. She had a phone clutched in her hand and worry on her face. "What do you mean? CPS?" Reyes asked, his hand around me protectively. "No, someone claiming to be his aunt," the woman said slowly. "Carol, that's not likely. We haven't confirmed who the next of kin are." "How do they know he's here?" Jim asked. His expression was dark. "I don't know, Jim. Maybe the mother called her. But I just got a call that this woman is coming in. She's also with the government. I don't understand this myself. I just got faxed over a lot of paperwork, too, that looks legit. We're to give the boy to this woman once she arrives," Carol explained, still looking worried. "Show me this paper. I don't want to give up the boy unless we know whoever comes to get him is an actual family member," Jim said, his voice full of authority. He stood up from his chair and followed Carol into the other room. Reyes looked at me, giving me a tiny squeeze. "Don't worry, little buddy. We'll take good care of you. If it was up to me, I'd take you home. Though I don't know how Lucia would feel about you. She would probably want to name you Ernesto, and you don't look like an Ernesto," he said jokingly. "Mama," I said, looking up at him and poking his cheek with my finger. He smiled at me. "Don't do that, little buddy, or I really will just run off with you," he said with a sigh. I settled back down into his lap, content just to feel warm and safe. I listened to the sounds of the station. The soft voices of the adults in the other room sounded comforting to me. I'd never been around so many people at once before. I breathed in. The place smelled clean. I could smell things I had never smelled before, which I would learn later was coffee and cleaning spray. Reyes, all the stuff that they faxed over looks legit, but it makes no sense. But when this woman comes in, we're to hand over the little boy. Jim looked at me with concern in his eyes. Reyes gripped me tighter. His hand patted my head and I giggled. I had known the man for such a short time, but I felt so safe when he held me. And we're okay with that? Did this mystery aunt even give us a name? Reyes asked, not disguising the concern in his voice. Apparently the woman just found out she had a nephew. The boy's mother called her, told her there was a boy and to come get him. Said she is running off to Mexico with a boyfriend, Jim said, not sounding convinced. Oh, how convenient. This doesn't sit right with me, Jim. Isn't there someone else we can call? Reyes asked. Hey now, there isn't anyone else to call. Carol was right. This woman coming in is some kind of government bigwig. There's no one we can call that can override this woman's authority, Jim shot back. Still doesn't sit right with me, Reyes said sadly, turning me around to look at him. You can't get too attached, kid. You'll end up with 100 kids by the end of the year, Jim said, sounding tired. The older woman, Carol, had walked back into the room and leaned against the door with her arms crossed. We should be thankful. Even if it's weird, this woman is his next of kin and seems to want him. That's a better outcome than we usually get, trust me, the woman said, rubbing her temples. The officers and the ladies in the office played with me for a while. One of them handed me a teddy bear. He was a fuzzy brown thing, and I had never had a stuffed animal before. I clutched him to my chest and smiled. The adults all smiled back at me, some with tears in their eyes. Eventually, that woman did arrive to pick me up. She arrived with an air of authority that even I didn't like. This was a woman who seldom heard the word no. She was dressed in varying shades of cream and white, and her hair was done up in a tight bun that was slicked back. Good evening, ma'am. I take it you're the boy's aunt? Officer Hostetta asked, his hands on his hips as he surveyed the woman. Of course I am. I came as soon as I heard about my poor nephew. It's all insane, really. I never knew he existed until a few hours ago. Her voice was calm and measured. So, you're telling me that your sister was a near-homeless drug addict with a secret kid? That you never knew about? And you're related to that woman? He asked, his voice laced with suspicion. The woman's eyes narrowed as she looked at the officer. Well, there's no telling how some people turn out. My sister had her demons. The woman said with a sad nod. It was unconvincing. Reyes stood up and walked me over to the woman. I wasn't scared, not really. More curious. I didn't recognize this woman, but in some ways she did look like my mama. They both had blonde hair and were thin, but the resemblance ended there. Good luck, little buddy. This lady is your aunt. She's going to take good care of you. Aren't you, ma'am? Reyes asked, that question directed at her. Absolutely. Now, let's get this young man to his new home. I'm sure he could use some rest. It's been a long night. Sleep deprivation isn't good for young brains. She said that last part with conviction. Goodbye, little buddy. You're going to be all right, Reyes said to me. He gave me one last hug, and I clung to him a little too tightly. He had to pry me off, and I saw tears in his eyes. The woman took my hand and I whimpered. Compared to the officers and even the ladies in the office, her hand was cold and unyielding. I didn't like it, but I knew better than to fight back. I turned and looked back, getting the last few glimpses of the people who had been so kind to me. I waved with my free arm, the one still clutching my new teddy bear. And then we were outside. A large car was waiting for us. A vehicle I would learn was a limo. A large and stern-looking man wearing sunglasses was waiting by the car door and opened it when the woman walked out with me. Despite it all, I was excited to get into another car and drive around. It would be the second car ride I ever had, and this one looked much larger and more inviting than the police car had been. The woman ushered me inside and the door was closed behind us. The windows were tinted and I was upset by this. I wanted clear glass so I could see outside at the passing scenery and look at the stars. "Well, you are a scrawny thing. If you survive the next few weeks, there's a good chance you'll make for an excellent subject. You were too good to pass up. A little boy with no next of kin, no birth certificate. You don't even have a name. You're as close to a blank slate as we're going to get. And if things don't turn out the way we want them to, no one will come looking for you," the woman said. "Do you know how we found out about you? Your mama gave you to us. You see, she ran into a little bit of trouble with her line of work. When she was forced into a corner, she offered you up as a trade, and we took it. Your mama might not know how valuable you are, but we do." The woman sighed. "I don't know why she called the police. That's what we get for letting her leave alive. Maybe she was hoping they'd be able to protect you, which is very hurtful, you know. What we're doing is for the benefit of all humanity," she added. I looked at her curiously. I only vaguely understood what this woman was saying to me. I felt a chill coming over me, and I felt like I might be in danger. I curled up into a ball on the seat and hugged my teddy bear tighter. If I made myself smaller, perhaps, she would forget I was there. "I just hope your brain isn't fried by all the drugs I expect your mother was on when she was pregnant with you," the woman said again. She was speaking, but not looking at me. It was like she was talking to the air. Or maybe she was just talking to herself. "But don't worry. You might not have a name, but we'll give you a number. And a purpose. And you're going to help us bring about the new phase of human evolution. Doesn't that sound wonderful?" the woman said, her voice raising a few octaves and sounding forcefully cheerful. "Mama," I said softly, peeking up at her from behind my eyes. The woman laughed, her hands clasped together in sincerity. "That's wonderful. You're already adapting so well and you don't even know it. You see, you can call me Mother," she said, laughing. Her laughter unsettled me, and I stayed glued to that chair, my only comfort, the stuffed animal. Eventually the car came to a stop, and the car door was opened. Mother held her hand out to me and I took it. I didn't have a choice. We stepped out into a paved driveway, and I looked up at a house that looked like a castle. It was huge, old and sprawling. I was immediately intimidated by the place, and I gripped harder to Mother's hand, seeking some kind of reassurance. She gave my hand a light squeeze. I squeezed back, grateful for any kind of comfort she would give me. "Welcome home. We're going to do so many great things together." I was rolling off my cot and onto the floor before the punch had time to connect. I heard the soft humph as his fist connected to the pillow, where a fraction of a second before my head had been. My brother tried to appear nonchalant, but I knew he was pissed. I could see it in the way his eyes narrowed, the stance he took, the light shock at having missed me that he tried not to let show. "You're getting faster," he said with an air of indifference. But I knew better. The tone was too flat, too measured. He was trying too hard, putting on a show for himself just as much as the others. My sister giggled, her hands pressed tightly to her mouth to muffle the sound. She was looking more deranged than normal. Her number was 678009, and that number was all she had. Her hair, a lovely shade of red, was disheveled and looked like a mop. Both Mother, the doctors, and other handlers had long since stopped trying to brush it. The last time someone did, she had bitten them, and even time in the no-no room hadn't done much to stop her. Another doctor had tried to sedate her so that he could shave her head. That had ended up with her biting off one of his fingers, and she had spent more time in the no-no room, and when she came out of it, she had stopped talking. I do think that had more to do with the injections than the trauma of several days in the no-no room. Mother had told us that 678009 was being put on a different cocktail of injections, and she hadn't been taking it too well. Her eyes, which had been a muted shade of brown, were now completely black. Where before there had been intelligence and humor and a soul, there was something else there. Something dark and cold, and I tried to avoid her whenever possible. She was becoming more animalistic as the days and injections went on. The only thing that seemed to bring her any joy was hurting others, or watching them hurt. And my brother, his citrine eyes still glaring at me, was more than happy to provide the violence to entertain our sister. "Stop it! Stop it right now," a voice said from behind us. The voice was soft, but strong, and it belonged to our other sister, 347879. Out of all of us, she was the smallest but also the fastest. I looked behind me, and there she stood with her hands on her hips, looking like a teacher chastising her unruly class. She was small-framed, her features were Asian, almost delicate-looking. But she was anything but that. Her eyes were a captivating chartreuse, courtesy of the injections. I liked staring into them. They were like emeralds, and they were far kinder than any of my other siblings' eyes. 678009 growled at her and dropped her hands. Her lips had been changing as well, becoming more like a muzzle, but the rest of her face and mouth hadn't kept pace with the mutations. Because of that, she was constantly drooling, her still human-looking teeth exposed, which might be another reason why she wasn't talking anymore. "347879 wasn't fazed by this at all. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her stance changed. It was subtle, but one that hadn't gone unnoticed by any of us. My dark-eyed sister stopped growling, and her eyes dropped and she looked away, acting as if she was suddenly distracted by something. And perhaps she was. Nothing seemed to hold her attention much anymore. "There's no problem here, little sister. We were all just playing, weren't we?" my brother said, his eyes darting to me as if daring me to disagree. "Oh yeah, it's all fun and games around here," I said, spreading my hands wide as if in supplication. I didn't feel like a fight. Not this first thing in the morning. In fact, I didn't feel like fighting for the rest of the day if I could help it. I had my new round of injections last night, and my bones hurt. My teeth ached. And I was scared, though I tried to hide it. Mother had noticed. It was like she was reading my mind. "Don't worry. These aren't the same injections we gave 678009. These are tailored to you, and won't have the same effect," she had told me with a smile. Still, I had laid awake last night staring at the ceiling, wondering if my mind would still be my own in the morning, or if I'd be a violent brute like my sister in the morning. So far, so good. And everything seemed normal. Though my teeth still ached, my lips were the same as they'd always been, as was the rest of my face. My brother and sister wandered off, probably in search of easier prey, which they probably wouldn't find. My two other brothers were awake, and they were eyeing their siblings as they walked past. "Are you okay? How'd the injections go last night?" 347879 asked, her eyes softer as she relaxed her pose. "Fine. As good as you could hope. Just sore, but that will pass," I said. I flexed my arms, trying to joke, but winced as my joints creaked. My sister grinned, her teeth sharp behind her human-looking mouth. "Let's get breakfast. They're actually feeding us pancakes today, on account of us all making our weekly goals," she said, already turning and walking to the cafeteria down the hall. And I perked up at that. Pancakes were a rare treat. We usually were fed a type of gruel, almost tasteless paste that was jam-packed with calories and protein, and who knows what else. All to keep our growing bodies fed and nourished. I sniffed the air, and I felt a pang of both alarm and delight that my sense of smell had increased. I could smell the pancakes from here when I concentrated. I could smell the cologne from the men who served us our breakfast, and a hint of cigarette smoke. I walked into the cafeteria, still sniffing the air, which I immediately regretted. The smells, which had been pleasant from a distance, were now overwhelming. They were too sweet, too intense, too much. Couple that with the underlying smells of cleaners and body odors and who knew what else, it was like a physical punch to my senses. I started breathing through my mouth, hoping no one would notice. It was not smart to show discomfort or pain. The result of that kind of attention usually was not good. "You get used to it," my green-eyed sister said. She hadn't even looked at me as she spoke. Her eyes were intent on the small mountain of pancakes in front of her. They had even provided butter and syrup for us. A very rare treat indeed. My mouth was watering, and I busied myself with creating my own tiny mountain of pancakes. I drowned it in so much syrup, I was certain one of our handlers would try to stop me. But a quick glance around and I saw the boredom in their eyes, and knew I was safe to indulge my sweet tooth. They would ignore us while we ate, but any sudden movements or odd behavior, and they'd be on us, tasers in hand, ready to dispense their own version of discipline. It tasted like heaven. It had been a month since we'd gotten such a treat. Sometimes they'd give us ice cream, pizza, or cheeseburgers if we were doing particularly well, but I couldn't remember the last time we'd been treated at breakfast. I ate like a starving man, which I kind of was. The injections always sped up your metabolism, and if you didn't eat, you'd get sick or pass out. Since no one stopped me, I went back for seconds. They only gave us water to drink, and I eyeballed the coffee the handlers were drinking with envy. I could smell it, and the smell was hard to place. I'd never had coffee before. I'd never even gotten close to trying it. But smelling it, I was overcome with curiosity. The adults seemed to live off the stuff, and I felt like I was being denied some kind of secret elixir. Maybe one day they'll let us try it. At least they gave us milk. There was an ongoing joke between all of us that they gave us so much since milk was good for growing bodies, and that's all our bodies seemed to do. Change. I glanced over at the other table where my yellow-eyed brother and dark-eyed sister were sitting together. My brother was eating just as much as I was, but my sister was not. She was staring down at her plate, slowly dripping syrup onto the plate, one drop at a time. It was irritating, but she seemed transfixed. The hair stood up on the back of my neck as I watched her. Her lips were moving slightly, as if she was speaking in a whisper, or even singing, but I couldn't hear anything even with my ears. I had to force myself to look away and focus on my own meal. Treats were a rarity, and you should never turn up your nose at one when you get it. But only a few seconds had passed before my green-eyed sister was staring past me at our sibling. Her eyes were narrowed, and her lips slightly parted in the beginnings of a snarl I wasn't even sure she intended. "What is she doing? She's going to ruin this for all of us," she hissed. I looked back, and my dark-eyed sister had dumped the whole container of syrup onto the plate, letting it spill over the table and herself. And she was giggling, a raspy, unhealthy wheeze that made me immediately on edge. My brother was looking at her too, the hostility plain on his face. He wouldn't do it himself, but in his eyes, I could read that he wanted to rip out her throat for ruining his breakfast. A handler sauntered over, a younger guy wearing the standard tactical gear that they all wore. "Stop that right now. Stand up and follow me to the lab immediately," he said with an air of authority none of us believed. I realized with surprise I could smell his fear. His heart rate was up. He was afraid, and though his face didn't show it, his body did. My sister looked up, her eyes finally coming into focus. The lab was where the no-no room was, the last place any of us wanted to be sent. She had a sudden and horrible stab of fear. I could smell it. The smell was so acrid it made me wince. She was like a cornered animal, and for all intents and purposes, she was. I felt pity for her then. Her fear was palpable, but there was nothing I could do, not if I didn't want to take her place in the no-no room. So I stayed seated. "You heard me? Get up and follow me," the guard said again. He was gripping his baton taser, though if it was a threat or reassurance I wasn't sure. She stood up and wobbled there for a second as if she was struggling to find her feet. The guard relaxed ever so slightly, and then she lunged at him. She was fast, faster than I'd ever seen before. It took everything in me to not leap up too, to dart out of the way, to help, I wasn't sure. But we were too well trained. We stayed rooted to the spot. Any sudden movements would be seen as hostility and make us a target. Better to stay still than risk being singled out. She didn't weigh very much, but combined with her strength and the element of surprise, she was able to knock the guard onto his back. He didn't scream, but I winced as I heard his body impacting the floor. He was wearing his padded armor, which I was sure absorbed some of the blow. His hands racked out, going for his face. She managed to rake her nails once before the man brought up his arms and covered his face, protecting the vulnerable skin. The other guards reacted at once. Someone hit the alarm and it blared in the small room. I closed my eyes involuntarily. It was just so loud. It felt like my eardrums were going to burst. One of the other guards brought his taser baton down on my sister. She screamed. But it wasn't a scream of pain, but rather frustration. I could smell her, smell the frustration on her, but I realized with a shock that she wasn't feeling any pain. She would smell different if she was in pain. She wasn't afraid either. I could smell her rage, and the guards were the unfortunate recipients. She stood up and leapt away from the guard on the floor, and then took a running leap at the guard that had hit her with the baton. He was older, and his reflexes were comically slow in comparison to hers. She went for his throat, and her nails tore into his skin and ripped away the skin, a shower of blood following. The man dropped his weapon and used both hands to grasp his throat. The third guard looked stunned. He was in the process of helping the first one up off the floor when he saw his co-worker's throat ripped out. His eyes were wide and he looked frozen. My sister howled in glee. She crouched down, preparing to leap when one of my brothers barreled into her. We were all taken by surprise. We had been obeying our training, none of us moving so that we wouldn't be mistaken for a target. But my brother had decided to ignore his training. His number was 322367, a dark-skinned boy no older than 10, making him the youngest of all of us. His own injections had turned his dark eyes into a smoky grey, and they seemed to glow now as he took our sister to the floor. "Don't hurt them," he bellowed. He was doing his best to restrain our sister and doing a decent job despite his smaller body and younger age. Our sister chuckled and leaned down and ripped his throat out with her teeth. Still, he held on. He let out a wail, one that was laden with pain. And before I knew what I was doing, I was away from the table and grabbing my brother as he finally released our sister and crumpled to the floor. I ripped off my shirt and pressed it to the wound on his neck, trying to stop the flow of blood. His injections weren't as far along as ours, but he had to have some advanced healing. If I could stop him from bleeding out, maybe his body would start to repair itself. He looked at me, his eyes wide. They looked like grey moons, pleading without saying a word as I kept steady pressure on his neck. "We need medics. We all need medics." But my words were lost in the flurry of violence. The guard with his throat ripped out was dead. A mind-boggling amount of blood coated the floor. My sister danced in it. She jumped in the red puddle as if it were water, giggling as it splashed her shins. The remaining guards were hitting her with their batons, but it didn't seem to be having any effect. They were screaming, and my sister screamed back at them, mocking them as she kicked blood in their direction. And then the doors to the cafeteria opened, and in walked Mother, a tranquilizer gun in her hand. She was calm, her hand steady as she brought the gun to her shoulder and took aim. My sister hissed, bringing her arms up in a vain attempt to protect herself. It didn't help. The dart fired and lodged itself into her torso, just above her navel. She swayed, sliding on the blood-slicked floor before falling and hitting the floor with a loud thunk. "Pick her up. Get her to the lab, strap her down and wait for me," Mother said, her voice tight with anger. Normally that tone would send me into a fit of anxiety, but I was too busy trying to stem the flow of blood from my brother's neck. It did feel like it was slowing, but I wasn't sure if it was because the flesh was starting to heal or that he was running out of blood. Concern flashed on Mother's face as she looked at us. "Bring the gurney. If we hurry, we can save my son." Mother's voice cracked as she ran to us, kneeling down and pressing her own hand to the boy's torn throat. A guard stepped behind me and grabbed the collar on my shirt, trying to haul me off the floor and away from my brother and mother. "Stop, you idiot! You touch him again and I'll use that baton on you," Mother snapped, her hand up and pointing to the guard behind me. Her hands were red with blood. "He moved from the table. He knows he's not supposed to move from the table," the voice behind me said. It was gruff and masculine and stupid. He had to have been a newer hire because anyone who had been around Mother long knew you didn't question her. Her eyes narrowed, and even beneath the slight smell of panic and worry I smelled on her, anger came blossoming. "Yeah, you never questioned Mother. You are relieved of duty. You no longer have a job. The other guards will escort you off the premises," she said coldly. I could smell the confusion roll off the man, but he let me go. Mother turned to look at me, and her expression softened. "You did well, my son. We will discuss everything that has happened later." "And what is happening to you as well," she explained, her eyes darting back to the boy in her arms. Even with pressure applied from both our hands, I could sense that he was near death. His eyes were closed, and he looked almost peaceful, as if he were sleeping in his mother's arms and not knocking on death's door. The med team arrived. They were efficient. They loaded my brother onto the gurney and sped back to the medical facilities. Mother went with him, like I knew she would. I kept kneeling on the floor. Blood from several people staining my clothes. The security detail had arrived as well, also with a gurney, though one modified to hold subjects with enhanced strength. She was still unconscious. She was sprawled on the floor, covered in blood and devoid of dignity. She looked like a puppet with its strings cut. I felt a wave of emotions hit me like a car. I squashed every single one of them. Now was not the time to feel. Now was the time to think and wait. There was a very real chance I was going to end up in the no-no room as punishment. And if that's all I got, I would get off lightly. I just hoped I wouldn't be stuck in the no-no room for days. A few hours would be enough, I hoped. I glanced at my remaining siblings. My yellow-eyed brother was staring at me, and for how long he'd been doing that I had no idea. His eyes were glowing with amusement, his lips slightly parted as if tasting the air. He was enjoying this. He had enjoyed seeing that man die, see our brother mauled, and he was savoring the fact that I would most likely be punished. I looked away before I got myself in trouble. Getting into a fight right now, while covered in blood, with guards' emotions running high, and I'd end up with a baton in places I'd rather not have one. My green-eyed sister was looking at me as well. Fear and sympathy and anger in her eyes. She wasn't trying to hide those emotions from me. I nodded in acknowledgement. My last brother was now seated alone at his table. He was shaking, tears silently running down his face. His pale lavender eyes looked wider than usual. His number was 114527, and next to my brother, fighting for his life in the medical center, he was the youngest. He looked at me, his purple eyes looking bloodshot. I gave him a small nod, though he didn't acknowledge it. He was in shock, and he needed to be somewhere warm. But I dared not move or speak until I was told. Another group of guards came into the room, and I was glad that I was still on the floor, trying my best to look as unthreatening as possible. Their emotions were high, the main ones being fear and anger. They laid out a body bag and put their dead comrade inside it and hauled him away. The guards looked at me, their faces stoic, but I could almost feel their hearts racing. I could see the tiny twitches as they gripped their weapons more than they needed to. I stayed perfectly still, my face a frozen mask of compliance. Mother was not here to protect me. A female guard approached me, one that had been here almost as long as I had. I even knew her name, though I wasn't supposed to know any of the guards' names. Her name was Joy, and that name always stuck with me, because this place was usually devoid of that emotion. "You need to come with me. I'm to take you to the medical facility. You're to shower and change and wait for your mother," she said with calm authority. I nodded, pushing myself off the floor. My feet were bare, and they squelched in all the spilled blood. It was a very unpleasant sensation. I didn't look behind me at my siblings. I could feel their eyes on my back as I left. I could feel everyone staring at me as we walked to the medical center. The cameras were all on me. I could feel it. The few personnel who walked through the halls stopped and stared, letting us pass. They knew better than to talk to either me or the guard escorting me. But that didn't mean they couldn't gawk and run to their co-workers to talk about what they had seen. They probably thought I had killed someone, and that thought made my stomach drop. The guard escorted me to the medical facility and deposited me on one of the empty beds without ceremony. She left me there and took up a position near the door. I was covered in blood still. I glanced at the floor and saw I had left a bloody trail all the way into the room. I felt a pang of sympathy for whoever had to clean the floors. I hoped they were paid well, but if they worked here, I was sure they were used to things like this. The blood on my clothes and hands was drying, leaving a horrible, crusty feeling all over me. I needed that shower. I slid off the bed and glanced at the guard to see if she was going to stop me. She watched me with professional disinterest, and I kept walking to the bathrooms. They were only semi-private. There were no lockable doors in the medical facility, but there was a privacy curtain, and that was enough. I peeled the clothes off and left them on the floor. They weren't salvageable, and the custodial staff would want to burn them. The shower felt divine. I closed my eyes and let the water fall over me. No one was timing my showers now like they usually did. So I indulged, enjoying the feeling of the warmth on my skin. It made me feel safe, and a tiny bit of the tension I was feeling left my body. Afterwards, I dried myself and changed into some medical scrubs they always have laying around. And then I went back to the bed to wait. By the time I had arrived, the floor had been scrubbed, and every trace of blood had been removed. I nodded my approval. I didn't want to stare at that blood. I didn't need reminders. I waited a long time, long enough that my stomach was starting to growl. The guards switched out, and I watched the clock ticking away with growing unease. Was the fact that so much time had passed without Mother showing up a good thing or a bad thing? I had no idea. And then, as if she had been summoned by my thoughts, Mother appeared. She gave me a small smile and reached out to squeeze my upper arm. The rest of the tension in my body finally eased. If I was in trouble, she wouldn't have touched me. When I was being disciplined or reprimanded, Mother was as cold as ice. Any type of affection meant that I was in the clear. Your brother died. The wound was too severe. She did too much damage, Mother said simply. I tensed. I felt tears welling in my eyes, and I had to mentally beat myself to keep them from falling. Mother didn't like any extreme shows of emotion, but she had seen. She gave my arm another squeeze and let me go, backing away and looking at me as if appraising me. Your sister is dead too. She had to be put down. That's what took me so long. Between trying to save your brother and arguing with Constantine, it all took much longer than I expected, she said, her eyes becoming stoic as she crossed her arms. What were you arguing about, Mother? The question escaped my mouth before I could think. I was telling Constantine that your sister had grown too unstable, that her injections weren't working. It wasn't the fault of the serums. It was a fault with her own genetic material. She should never have been a candidate, Mother said darkly. She was staring off into the distance as if reliving the argument. How did she die? I asked, my voice soft. I suspected the answer, but I wanted to hear it from her. I had to put her down. She was a wild animal, not worth saving. Constantine thought she might still be of use. But then she woke up, broke her restraints, and tried to attack him. After that, he agreed to the termination. Mother shook her head, uncrossing her arms. I nodded. I thought that might be the case. Mother had only terminated 2 of my siblings before this. One, a young boy who reacted badly to his injections. That termination was considered the humane option. Another, a girl with the number 897006, who refused to respond to her call number. She was defiant, insisting that her name was Rose, and she kept trying to escape. After her last escape attempt, Mother had made them all watch as she injected her with the poison that stopped her heart. It was a harsh lesson, one they all learned quickly. Never try to escape, and never forget your number. "I'm sorry, Mother. It wasn't your fault," I said, trying my best to comfort her. Though in the back of my mind a hateful voice called out, "It was your fault, Mother. You gave us those shots. You made us monsters. This is you, reaping what you have sown." But I squashed that voice down. I rarely hear it anymore. The business of surviving was enough to keep it quiet most days. "You're a good son, and you're one of our best subjects. That's why we're ready to move on to our next phase of injections. You demonstrated something important today when you rushed in to help your brother," Mother said, with a tiny hint of pride. "But I broke the rules. I was worried I would get punished," I blurted out. "And normally you would be. But these were special circumstances. If you and all of your siblings had been able to respond to your sister, then a guard and your brother might not have died. I've talked to Constantine about changing the rules. If someone's life is in danger, yours or a guard, you are now able to defend yourself and others." "It was a stupid rule anyway," Mother said dismissively. "That sounds fair," I muttered. I was surprised. "But now, it's time for your new set of injections," Mother said. She gestured, and a nurse that had been behind the curtain appeared, a medical tray arrayed with a series of syringes, 5 in total, all with a clear blue liquid inside of them. I shuddered without meaning to. No matter how many times they stuck me, I still did not like needles. "And don't worry, this is entirely different than what I gave your sister. This is tailor-made to your genetic code. But there will be mutations, but don't be alarmed. They shouldn't hurt," Mother said warmly. Her eyes gleamed. This always was her favorite part, getting to see the fruits of her labor take shape. I held out my arm dutifully, and she injected me, one at a time with practiced precision. I felt the liquid enter my bloodstream. It was cold, and I swear I could feel it spread out through my body. And then it burned, and I winced. But then the burning melted into a pleasant warmth. My vision swam and narrowed, and I fell back onto the tiny hospital bed without realizing it. "Don't worry, this is all part of the process," Mother cooed. And then I started convulsing. It was like I was cold and couldn't stop shivering. It wasn't a seizure. It was something worse. I felt it in my teeth, a deep and unpleasant throbbing as new teeth formed and pushed their way out of my gums. The other teeth felt like they were getting sharper. My lips pulsed and shimmered and split, bulging into a shape I didn't recognize. It felt like my face was covered in bee stings. And it didn't hurt, not really. It was like a deep and distant ache in my body, and I wondered if Mother had put morphine into the syringes as well to muffle the pain. My feet grew, pads forming on the bottom of my feet, my nails curving into wicked-looking claws. My body was shivering so violently, my body contracting so much, that Mother and the nurse had to physically restrain me. I almost laughed. They should have thought to tie me down before they injected me. There was one last shudder that ripped through my body, one so violent that I ended up vomiting the last of my breakfast onto the floor before I fell back into the bed with an undignified thump. Mother kept a grip on me for a few minutes longer, but she was smiling, truly smiling, as if she had won some kind of prize. The nurse backed away, her eyes wide over her surgical mask. Mother clasped her hands to her mouth and laughed, softly, as though she were pleased. She turned to the surgical tray and grabbed a tiny mirror that was laying there. She held it up to my face so I could see what I had become. I didn't recognize the face staring back at me. My eyes, which had been a clear and mesmerizing blue, were now luminous and inhuman. My hair was a different color, paler and longer. And my mouth. I brought up my hand to feel what had become of my mouth. My hands trembled. I had a muzzle now like a dog or a wolf. I pulled my lips back to reveal my new teeth, all of them sharp and bloody from the change I had just gone through. I could no longer pass for human. I was something else entirely, something new. "Oh, my son, you're beautiful," Mother said with awe. Before we go, I just want to thank you for sticking around until the very end. I want to give a huge shout-out to the Librarian Chick for collaborating with me on this entire Cryptid Bounty Hunter series. And I really hope you enjoyed Forest's origin. This one turned out exactly how I hoped, and I loved working on it. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can check out my Patreon linked in the description, or my Buy Me a Coffee link as well. It truly helps more than you know. Thank you all so much. I appreciate every one of you. I love you all. And until next time, goodbye.
Black and the rain is cold. I'm leaking red and I'm growing bold. That bastard took a mouthful of my goddamn arm, thinking he'd do some permanent harm. He's huffing in the thicket, smelling the meat, watching me stumble on my own 2 feet. But I'm Dr. Whisper, you son of a bitch, and I'ma leave you rotting in a mountain ditch. Come on then, monster, let's settle the bill. Only one of us is walking off this ridgeline hill. I don't give a damn about you, holler you hide. I'm the last fucking thing you're gonna see tonight. The silver is thirsty, the iron is hot. I'm taking every bit of the soul you ain't got. He burst from the pines like a demon of old. 7 feet of muscle, gray and cold. He slammed me back against a jagged oak tree, trying to tear the living life out of me. I felt my ribs snap, I tasted the grit. He opened his maw and he snorted my spit. He thought I was broken, he thought I was done, but the real fucking nightmare has just begun. He lunged for my throat, a wall of fur and hate. But he realized his mistake a second too late. I didn't flinch, and I didn't pray. I just found the opening, and I carved my way. Grabbed his matted chin, drove the steel through the jaw, up into the brain, through the bone and the flaw. I twisted the handle till I felt the spark twitch. Remember what I told you? I'm Dr. Whisper, you son of a bitch. I'll clean off the blade, stitch up the skin. Tomorrow I'll go find his fucking kin. I'll clean off the blade, stitch up the skin. Tomorrow I'll go find his fucking kin.